Welcome to those of you that are live. We are live with Kevin, but really today what we're doing is the second time only, a live version of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. And we'll get to the podcast in just a second. If you're joining us, please feel free to share your questions and your comments. We'd love to have you do that. Before we do that, though, I want to make a quick comment about our upcoming event. And that upcoming event is called the Virtual Leader Con. I'll put the thing up here, virtualleadercon.com. You can learn more about this online 5-day live leadership development opportunity from any device. You can join us. You can learn all about that. We're going to have guests all week long, over 30 leadership experts, many of whom you know, whose books you've read. But I'm going to challenge them to share their very latest with us, how we deal with leadership and do it successfully in 2020. So that's what we're going to do at Virtual LeaderCon. Hope you'll join us there. And by the way, if you love this venue, we're going to use a different platform than wherever you are with us live now. But if you like this concept of me talking with smart people, then you'll love Virtual LeaderCon. So after that, let's move on and get back to our previously scheduled podcast. The Remarkable Leadership Podcast today, the focus is on urgency. And the flames of urgency are all around us. And today we're going to talk about the perils, the promise, and the problems with urgency. And I have a guest. I'll introduce him in just a second. But if you're with us live, here's the good news. If you're with us live and you've not been aware of the podcast, you want to join us, you can either remarkablepodcast.com/Facebook or remarkablepodcast.com/LinkedIn. So you can get access to these live in the future. Of course, you can just go to remarkablepodcast.com to sign up as a podcast like every other podcast, but live, you not only can interact with us, but not only that, you get, in this case, a 2+ month head start between when this is happening live and when people will hear it later. So join us in your favorite social media, a group, a channel in that group to join us. Have you do that? Let me introduce my guest. You can see him if you're watching. His name is Brandon Smith. He's the author of a brand new book, but let me tell you a little bit about Brandon. He's a leading expert in leadership communication and a curer, get this, of workplace dysfunction. Known as the workplace therapist, Brandon is a sought-after executive coach, TEDx speaker, and author of a new book we're going to talk about in a second, an award-winning business school instructor. He's been featured in the Wall Street Journal, Fast Company, CNN, FoxNews.com, NPR, and Forbes, and many other locations. His book, The Hot Sauce Principle, here it is, The Hot Sauce Principle, how to live and lead in a world where everything is urgent all the time. It helps leaders master urgency so they can more effectively lead others, manage others' unrealistic expectations, and prevent burnout at home too. Seems timely. Brandon, welcome. Glad to have you.
Hey, Kevin, thank you. I love the way you set this up where you said urgency, there's the perils and the problems and the promise. I thought that was such a great way to set this up.
Hey, whatever I can do to help, Brandon. Listen, I'm glad that you're here. Thanks for being here. We learned in the short amount of time that we spent before we came online or on live that we have some things in common. But I really want to start, how you got here, how you ended up doing the work that you do. Sort of tell us a little bit about the journey that got you to where we are today.
Yeah, so I'll kind of go all the way back in time a little bit. So my undergraduate degree was in communications. And like most good communication majors, I was unemployed at graduation, wondering what am I going to do with this thing. And I got a job with a small chain of family-owned retail stores, 15 stores. And my boss was the son-in-law of the business. So the woman who started the business, her daughter marries this guy. He's my boss. And I'm going to be the assistant manager at one of these stores. So he greets me at the door of my first day of work. Now, I've had other jobs, but this was my first full-time job after college.
Exactly.
So he greets me.
You're in the big time now, Brandon.
I'm in the big time. This is full-time, right? Salaried and everything. So he greets me at the door and he says, I'm so excited to have you here. We're really thrilled. You're going to be the assistant manager of the store, but your first task is waiting for you in the back room. I want you to go in the back room, and it's the current assistant manager, but he doesn't know you're coming. So your job is to go back there and fire him, and then you get his job. And that was my first task on my first full day of work, Kevin.
And that was the start of saying there's got to be a better way.
You're exactly right. Because that's how my boss rolled. He loved to do all the things that we know leaders shouldn't do. He'd love surprise visits to try and catch you doing something you shouldn't be doing. He'd do a surprise visit and he'd say, I don't like what Sharon's wearing up front. Go fire her. I had to do more layoffs in the first 6 months of that job than any other time in my career. And a kind of a light bulb hit me that that was really where my purpose was born. First, I realized, man, if this was any indication of the state of leadership in the world, we really got to fix that. Second, work should be a source of fulfillment, meaning, and purpose for us as much as possible, and not a source of pain and stress and anxiety. We'll talk about anxiety today. And then finally, that was my purpose was born, that I wanted to eliminate all workplace dysfunction everywhere forever, having no idea what I just signed up for. So that set me on a path of going to pursue a clinical therapy degree, and I practiced inpatient for a number of years, and then I transitioned over to the corporate world and got an MBA, and kind of the rest is history. But that was the spark.
So Brandon, here's what I would say. People say, well, you'll always have a job if you're own a funeral home, right? I would say if your goal is to eliminate all workplace dysfunction, you'll always have a job. We'll just leave it at that.
And just when I thought I had it all figured out, we have a pandemic.
And we'll get to that in a few minutes too.
The whole apple cart is flipped upside down.
We'll get to that in a couple minutes too. And so welcome Scott, who's joining us elsewhere, saying hello to him. Here's the topic today: urgency. Let's get on with it. We got to get on with it. This is too important to not get on with it, Brandon. So why is it that urgency is so pervasive now?
There's a lot of reasons for that. So let's go back in time slightly before COVID and the pandemic. My experience has been, it didn't matter what workplace you were in, nonprofit, for-profit, U.S., global, those two kind of important factors at play that we were all dealing with. First, time was our most precious resource, not money, it was time. And second, everything was urgent all the time. It's this constant pressure to keep up, get ahead. There's a lot of reasons for that. Technology is one, for certain. Our ability to work kind of anywhere all the time doesn't lead for natural boundaries very well. Yeah, so there's that component to it. The global pressures, I think still in many cases, a lot of companies still have never really fully, in industries, have never fully recovered from 2008, 2009. Everyone's operating very lean. And then just general pressure from the markets to get ahead. So you really see it in publicly traded companies. But you start to take all those factors, and there's this constant push. So I would say all those have kind of created this environment where, we feel like everything is urgent all the time.
Well, and the faster you drive, the faster things come at you, right? And so whether it's in the business world, whether it's in the publicly traded companies, or whether it's the 24/7 news cycle, whatever it is, there's all sorts of factors that are pushing us that direction. But I put this word here. If you're watching, you can see urgency, exclamation point 3 times. But I don't think that urgency is all bad. You've kind of painted a bad picture here, big guy. But I'm curious. Actually, I know because I've read the book. But is it always a bad thing?
No, it's not. So urgency at its fundamental level is a state of discomfort. Sometimes we need that. So, for example, Kevin, my kids give me a hard time about this because I do it every year. But I have my annual physical coming up on Tuesday. And every time I get my annual physical set, it begins my workout routine.
You start running. This is like I start flossing before I go to the dentist.
That's exactly right. It creates that urgency for me. And it says, oh, man, I don't want to show up and be in horrible shape. The doctor's going to beat me up. So I want to come in my best shape I can. So it creates that urgency. And that's true for all of us in life when we've had change. Urgency is the back in our day, I don't know how college kids are today, although my daughter's a freshman, but the urgency of you got to get the paper in by 5 p.m. on Friday. So 4:59, I'm sliding it under the professor's door. So the only thing that's changed
is that now it's 11:59 p.m.
5
p.m. That's the only thing that's changed.
And you're hitting maybe send or something. That's right.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You're not printing. And sliding under the door, you're hitting send by 11:59. That's the only thing that's changed because human nature says at the end is when we're going to do it, right?
So it's a state of discomfort at a fundamental level. And the question is, can we make it a healthy state of discomfort? which is the fundamental element around change. So when you think about John Kotter and his 8 steps to change, you must have a high enough sense of urgency is number one. So we're trying to lead any kind of change initiative. You got to have urgency. It's critical. The issue is when we have it tip over to an unhealthy level of discomfort. That's when all the bad stuff happens.
So, okay, so let's just give everybody a really simple example. Every time someone's coming to our house, plumber, HVAC, everything gets clean. I said, first of all, our house already, while not perfect, is better than many of the houses they go to, I guarantee. But when they're coming, like, I got to clean the house. No urgency about cleaning the house yesterday, but today, got to clean the house. That's why we all have dirty garages, or most of us do anyway, right? So urgency isn't always bad. You tell a story in the book about if without a way to create urgency, you actually paid to create urgency, so you get a book written, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. I really struggled. This book was 3 years in the making. And every time I would try and set aside time on my calendar, it wasn't a high priority. I had other pressing needs that would come up. So I had to create my own sense of urgency. I hired a book coach, and she essentially operated like our college professors. She'd say, Brandon, chapter 4 is due on Friday by our call at 8 a.m. You better have it ready. And sure enough, Thursday night, I'd be typing up chapter 4.
She really wanted a day earlier than that so she could look at it. But nonetheless, you got there because of that. So urgency isn't all bad. And yet today we're going to mostly talk about what's the danger of it, how that discomfort becomes disruptive, perhaps.
That's right.
So let's just talk about, you mentioned it earlier, how has COVID, I'll use that as the shorthand for all of 2020, but how has that impacted urgency from your perspective, from your lens?
Well, it really depends. So if you've got folks on the front lines or essential workers, urgency has just gone to a whole other level. And in addition to that, remember it's anxiety. So it's anxiety by itself, but then think about all the other, peripheral anxieties. I'm worried about my health. I'm worried about my family's health. I'm worried about getting toilet paper. I mean, there's all these other kind of things that add more hot sauce into that mix. So if you're in that space, your urgency's gone up even a whole other level. If you're maybe not an essential worker, you have different kinds of urgency, because now while it might not be, it might be urgency to kind of keep things running because now your colleague to your left and right has just been furloughed, or you're the one who's been furloughed, and now you've got this urgency and anxiety, but no outlet in which to take action on it. Because in a perfect world, what we do when we feel urgency is it's a state of discomfort, and it often triggers a do reaction for us. So yeah. I know I've got this doctor's appointment. So what am I going to? In fact, I'm going to the gym later today. My wife convinced me to join Orange Theory. I've almost died 4 times, Kevin. We'll see if I make it.
That's contrary to the whole going to the doctor to be healthy thing. I don't know. I almost died, so I can prepare to go to the doctor. So we are talking with Brandon. We're talking with Brandon Smith.
If we don't have a place to do action, then that can be a whole other sense of frustration.
Absolutely. Sorry, I didn't mean to jump on top of you there. We're talking with Brandon Smith, the author of the book The Hot Sauce Principle. And so if you're with us live and you have a question, you have a comment, feel free to put it in. I will see them. We'll ask those questions. We'll make those comments. But since the book is called The Hot Sauce Principle, the question is, why is the metaphor hot sauce? Talk a little bit about the metaphor. I think that's interesting in and of itself. Just real quickly about that, and then we're going to dive into how all this matters, why all this matters to us as leaders.
Yeah, I think the idea of hot sauce is a simple, easy metaphor for everyone to get, because that's really urgency. If you think about it kind of a fundamental level, life's a little bit better with a little bit of spice. You put a little spice on things and it's good. It adds flavor, it adds color, it adds intensity, it adds priority, focus. Those are good things. But imagine you go to a restaurant, and this is the problem that we often see in kind of large corporations. Imagine you order your appetizer, it's covered in hot sauce. You order your salad, it's covered in hot sauce. You order your iced tea, it's covered in hot sauce. The entree, and then all the way down to the brownie dessert covered in hot sauce. Well, then now no longer is it adding a little bit of flavor or perspective. Now your mouth's on fire. So the whole idea behind it is a little bit of this creates kind of focus, and it begs for relief. So then we're ready for an action plan. Too much of it, and we're just overwhelmed. And then the real trick, the real art in this, Kevin, is that some people only need one drop. That's all they need. Other folks need a couple bottles. So it's knowing your people, knowing kind of how much urgency you need to create. That's kind of just the right amount to get people kind of moving down the path they need to move down.
So clearly you have the endorsement of the Tabasco sauce people. But the other way to look at this is, because I see the little one in here and I see the one behind you, but the other thing is different kinds of hot sauce, right? Some people need it hot. Some people need more. Some people need it hotter. Here's the thing that I wrote down as you were talking. I was thinking about another ad from when you and I were younger for a different kind of product that said, a little dab will do you. And that's really the case with hot sauce. We need some, but we don't need too much. And how much is too much is a big part of where we're headed here. So as leaders, you've talked about why urgency is so pervasive in general and why it's sort of all around us all of the time. And yet all of us, or most of us, are looking to our leaders, our supervisors, our manager, our boss, to draw our cues and our clues. And most people who are watching and listening are those people for others as well. So I thought we'd start with this question, or go to this question, like, how are leaders impacting the amount of urgency and how people are able to deal with the urgency in their workplaces?
Yes, so they're the cooks in the kitchen. So they are the impactors. They're the ones deciding how much to put on and what to put it on. And so if it's okay, I'm going to answer with how leaders are doing it in the wrong way, and then maybe how they should do it in the right way.
And yeah, I use the word impact because it can go either way, right? So yeah, absolutely. 100%.
Absolutely. So when they impact it the wrong way, what happens is they're taking their anxiety that they're feeling, maybe it's pressure from shareholders, wherever the pressure's coming from, and they're just or pressure from their boss, and they're just pushing it down into the system. Okay, and so that's when they're saying everything is urgent all the time. I was sitting in a meeting with a senior leader at a large company, and he was talking to his team, and they asked him after he finished his meeting, they said, well, which one of these should we start with first? Which initiative is most critical? He said, we're behind on all of them. They're all urgent. They're all a priority right now, which is another way of saying none of them are
exact. That's exactly what I just wrote down. You know, if you look at the root word of the word priority, it was singular. There was there was no such thing as multiple, right? And yet, if you got 5 goals, you got no goals. If you got 5 priorities, you got no priorities. Yeah. And all we're doing is, and so as leaders, if that's what we're doing to our folks, first of all, we're leading to burnout, which is one of the things we may talk about before we're done, but we're not helping our folks, right?
Yeah. So, and this also ties to a TED Talk I did several years ago about the contagiousness of emotions in the workplace. And that's not my original concept. That's been a body of growing research that's happened for the last 20, 30 years. But the simple idea that ties to this is that when a leader feels a certain way, we're going to feel what she or he feels. So if the leader's freaking out, we're going to be freaking out. So, imagine now in COVID times, our leaders freaking out, making everything urgent. It's only going to create more urgency and anxiety for us. So that's when you use it improperly, too much, and it's on everything. Now, when it's done well, the leader, particularly think how important that is today, the leader is coming as a place of calm, and they're focused, and they're only putting hot sauce on maybe 3 things, at the most 5. And I see the leaders that have been most effective navigating even through these tough times are very clear on the initiatives and the areas to focus. And there's somewhere between 3 to 5.
And hopefully all of those 3 to 5, and I would personally lean closer to 3 than 5, but hopefully those things, 3 or 5, whatever, are all tied to the bigger picture too, right? So it doesn't feel like 3 or 4 disparate things, but rather they're all connected to this bigger purpose. I want to go back to something you were saying about, if the leader's all freaked out, everyone else is going to be freaked out. And you're right. And if you're sitting there, Mr. or Miss Leader, thinking, well, that's better now because they can't see me because I'm in my house and they're in their house. Trust me, they can still tell. And just because they can't see you running around literally with your hair on fire in the office doesn't mean they can't tell that you're freaked out. And so you got to take a breath, because if you don't, they can't take a breath, right? Yeah. There's something else that you talk about in the book that I don't know, as I was thinking about this topic going into the book. So a little inside baseball for everybody. Someone that we both know said, hey, you need to meet Brandon. And I said, hey, Brandon, send me your book. So you sent me the book. And I looked at I don't have someone on that is an author without deciding first if I'm going to have them on by reading the book, or at least looking at the book to start with. So I saw urgent. It's like, I know some stuff about this. This is useful. It's timely. We should do all that. And then I start reading, and I read about, in fact, when I opened it just now, I opened to that page. I wasn't necessarily expecting to hear about trust. It makes total sense. But I'm guessing if people are listening and say, I'm into what Brandon's saying, I recognize this, I see myself in this conversation. Can you pull in for everybody here the connection? There's a great story in here too, but the connection between urgency and how we as leaders are making everything urgent and trust.
Yeah. So let's go back to this definition I gave. It's this kind of a state of discomfort. And so if you're going to put someone in a state of discomfort, in that moment, they're going to ask themselves, do I trust her or him enough to allow them to make me feel this way? Which is often why, if we look at the kind of the textbook new leader moving into a role, we say, gosh, you should probably spend 6 months learning the business, learning the people before you start to change everything. Because we want them to build trust. So trust is a critical first ingredient in order for you to be effective in putting urgency on someone else. So I offer in the book kind of a simple trust equation. So a way to think about trust is, so you got to kind of put on your math hats for a minute. It's authenticity plus vulnerability in parentheses. Okay, so authenticity plus vulnerability in parentheses. And then whatever that sums up to, you multiply that by credibility. And that gets us trust. Now, when I first did the formula, so I was trying to figure out a way to turn, I taught MBA students for years, how do you make trust a mathematical equation? MBA students like math. And so when I first did it, I did it as an addition formula. And it crashed and burned because you could have zero credibility and still come out with positive trust. So I had to put that multiplier in the middle. And why that's so important is if credibility goes to zero, trust goes to zero, which makes sense for us. And if authenticity, vulnerability goes to zero, trust goes to zero, which maybe isn't something we would think about. But particularly in COVID times right now, where we're trying to relate to people virtually, the leaders that have embraced authenticity and a little bit of vulnerability have really enhanced trust with their teams. And the ones that have pushed back on that, it's probably cost them some trust.
Yeah, I would say that that's completely true. So I appreciate you sharing that for a couple of minutes there, Brandon. So here's the thing. As leaders, you've already said, people are looking to us. You are an example. You're leading by example, whether it's a good example or not. People are watching. So what I want to do is, because in your book, even in the title, it says live and lead, so everywhere. So we're not just having the leadership lens, but also the personal lens. I want you to help us think about some strategies. Because if we can start to figure this out for ourselves, then we're setting the right example. We'll talk more about the leadership of it itself in a minute, but what are some strategies that we, human beings, can employ to help us keep urgency in its proper place? How about that?
Yeah, so there are a few strategies that we can do for keeping urgency in its proper place. And Kevin, you were breaking up on me just a little bit, so let me know if you can hear me okay.
I wondered when there was that pause. We haven't had a pause. I not like my question. Now I get it. So yeah, talk to us as human beings first, then we'll get back to being leader.
So as human beings, I think one of the important things is understanding what are some of those key priorities that are important for us in life. So in other words, almost rank ordering all of the things that are important to us. How much is health important to us? Are personal relationships important to us? Work important to us? And being able to kind of rank those in more of a priority fashion. So essentially the antidote's the same in any case. It's all about prioritization. It's all about knowing where we put hot sauce and where we don't. So, and one of the things that I think that this time where we've all been quarantined and been home has helped to teach us, and hopefully we're listening, is what really is important to us. And so being able to, the starting place for us as human beings is making that master list of what is important to us. And then the second step is going to be, all right, now how do I protect it? So I'm going to wear my therapist hat for a minute. As a therapist, one of my favorite words is boundaries. And so this really is about boundaries. So it's about prioritization and then boundaries. And now it's going to require us being able to manage the people around us, because other people don't like it when we set boundaries on them. So we'll have to learn how to push back properly, whether that is our boss or our customers or anyone else it might be. But those are the essential steps as human beings. Prioritize what matters and protect them with boundaries.
And just like you're saying, write down the priorities, not just have them in your head. You got to write down the boundaries. You can use the word boundaries. You can now taking it back to the work, specifically to the workplace, the expectations. I find leaders all the time say, well, that's what I want them to do, but they can't describe it clearly to me yet. Verbally, writing it down helps us clarify both the priorities. And as I was listening to you talk about the priorities piece, the additional word I wrote down was values. Yeah. Very connected, I think. And when we're clear, here's the other thing. When we're really clear on our priorities and our values and what's important to us, that is very attractive. And we become more influential almost instantly because clarity is attractive, right?
Yeah. But it also is a level of authenticity and vulnerability, because I'm going to put a stake in the ground. And what are they going to do to me when I do that? That can be a little bit scary. Yeah. But you're right. We want to follow people that are led by their values and really stand by those. Absolutely.
Yeah. So maybe the most valuable thing that feedback I've ever gotten from my team is, when you write books about leadership and the people on your team read them, that's a level of authenticity right there, a requirement right there. And so maybe the most valued thing I've ever heard from a member of my team is that Kevin lives or tries to live the stuff he writes. And so so it's like, it's all out there. Right. And, I'm either doing it or I'm not, but hopefully I'm at least working in that direction. I think that's really great. Everybody, boundaries and priorities, and then boundaries to help us protect those.
Can I give a quick personal example of something?
Absolutely. Please do.
So I realized I was spending too much time working on the weekends. I want to spend time with my family. I want to spend time taking care of myself, recharging, spending too much time on the weekends, working. And I did a simple trick that helped me with this. I no longer send emails on the weekends. I do them, and I use Microsoft Outlook. So you can schedule them to go out Monday morning at 8 a.m. So I had this little stack that goes out, but I stopped sending them on the weekends because what I realized was I was inadvertently creating urgency for somebody else. The recipient would get the email, and then now we've got email tennis going on. They hit it back into my court, I hit it back in their court. And when I stopped sending them, it was quiet. And I could do some work, spend more time with my family, and I wasn't creating urgency on anyone else, and I wasn't creating that email tennis game and putting urgency on me. It was a simple strategy, but it works really, really well. And I leverage out of office like you wouldn't believe. If I'm unavailable, I'll write a nice personal out of office, like I'm moving my daughter into college. I won't be available for the next 2 days or whatever happens to be. So those are little simple strategies, but they help us to kind of maintain some of those boundaries.
Speaking of states of discomfort, sending your daughter to college is one of those things. I did it, I know, but mine's not a freshman; she's a senior. So one more thing to sort of tie a bow around this for us as leaders, and I think people can make the connections, and we've talked about it a lot. But any other things you'd say for us as leaders in terms of how we can help our teams? Obviously, as we're doing it better ourselves, we're helping our teams. And your example just there is a perfect one. But anything else you want to say about this for us as leaders around all of this urgency and how we can help our teams be more effective?
Yeah, I would say there's probably two things. So the first is really get to know what's going on with your teams. So learn about what's on their plate. So if they've got a full plate, just recognize that when you're putting something new on their plate, if it's to be healthy, then there needs to be a trade-off. You can't just keep stacking. So that's the first thing, is understand what's
unless it's a pancake, and then stack away, my friend.
Sure, that's right.
We're good with that. Because I'm going to the doctor next week, so just bring me another pancake.
So the second thing I would say, and this came from a client of mine that I was sharing the story with several years ago, and he was notorious for creating urgency everywhere. He had a small software company, and so I gave him one of my little bottles. Okay, I gave him one of these. Well, he went out and he bought 3 So then he had 3 bottles, and he put them all on his desk. 1, 2, 3. And whenever there was a new initiative that was urgent, he would hand that bottle to the owner and said, here, you have to hold on to this bottle until that project is done. And what that created for him was a forcing mechanism, because he only had 3 bottles. So he could only make 3 things urgent at a time. So the other way that as leaders that can then help us is really create some kind of forcing mechanism, so you know how much urgency you're putting into the system. And maybe that's just a simple reminder, is just get 3 bottles of hot sauce, stick them on your desk, and have your team know that when you give a bottle, it means this is a priority, but I can only have 3 running at a time.
The addition, it is a forcing mechanism. It's exactly right. Here's the other interesting thing that crosses my mind as you say that. So if now, as the guy whose name is on the door as well, right? Like, I've gotten rid of my 3 bottles, but I really have this 4th thing we need to do. That means I have to go take a bottle back, which means I'm giving someone the chance to say, okay, I can reprioritize my work, because that's no longer, I can't go in and say, no, I'm taking this back, but you still got a bottle. Can't do that. Like when you have something physical. So, and the last thing that I hear in that is this thing again about being vulnerable. When we tell folks, when we tell our team what we're working on, what we're struggling with, what we're trying to get better at, we hopefully have the chance to get feedback from them. It raises trust with them. But the other thing it does is it holds us accountable for it.
Yeah.
So we're done talking about work. I want to ask you what you do for fun.
Well, right now it's working out, getting ready for my.
Yeah. But that's not fun. You do it all the time, not just before the doctor, Brandon.
Spending time with my family is some of the most. That's my fun. That's my fun. And one of the things we specifically always love to do. You can probably gather if you look behind me. We love to go to Disney. So our fun is typically Disney trips. I've got 3 kids, a daughter and 2 sons. And so since they were little, we've always done that. So, doing things like that, it's just always been fun. And then when my free time, I write books and do other stuff. I do love what I do. So that also takes up a lot of time. I love the fact that you said plural books, because we've only got 1. That means there's going to be more, Brandon. I like the sound of that. So speaking of books, pressure. No pressure. Urgency. Just accountability. The healthy level of discomfort. How about that? So speaking of books, tell us something you're reading these days. What's something you've read recently or that you're reading now that people might find interesting? Yeah, I would say let's build on this topic of vulnerability. So Brene Brown has many, many books out. I still like Daring Greatly. I think it's a great read, and I just reread it recently. It's really all about the power of vulnerability for us as leaders and how you leverage it, whether it's to create psychological safety, which is so important when you think about inclusivity and some of the conversations people are now having at work, but also ties innovation. So I can't say enough good things about that book. Awesome. Daring Greatly by Brene Brown. If you don't know, that'd be a good one for you to pick up. If you're watching us later or listening to us later, that'll be in the show notes, a link to that, as well as a link to Brandon's book, The Hot Sauce Principle. So tell everybody, Brandon, where they can get information about what you're up to. I'll try to get that in there. Information about what you're up to, how they can connect with you, get a copy of the book, point people. Would you please? So I would say the simplest place is my handle is The Workplace Therapist. So if you Google The Workplace Therapist, you'll find me. I'm the only one. So and on the site, theworkplacetherapist.com, there's podcasts and blogs and other free resources to help you have a healthier work life. And then you can also click on the book icon, where you can either order a personalized copy from me, or you can go directly to Amazon and buy one that way. Theworkplacetherapist.com. So now a question for all of you who are watching, whether you're here live or whether you're here later. Here's the question. It's a question I ask every episode. Now what? What are you going to do? What action are you going to take from this? So hopefully it was entertaining, listening to 2 old white guys talk. But beyond that, entertainment really wasn't our goal. And I don't believe it was yours either. Your goal was to take something from this that you can use and be more effective with. Maybe it's the 3-bottle strategy that we just heard. Maybe it's something that you're doing to create more urgency for yourself. Maybe you learned or were reminded today that you need to put a little more hot sauce on one of your projects. Whatever it is that you got today, what action are you going to take? Think about my favorite question, now what?
and do something with your answer to that question. I hope that you'll do that. And so, Brandon, thank you so much for being here. It was an absolute pleasure to have you. I thank Jennifer Conweiler for introducing us and for you being on the show. It was a pleasure to have you. And so everyone,
Joy to be here.
Please go ahead.
No, joy to be here. Thank you, Kevin. You do amazing work, and I'm so thrilled I've been able to be part of the show today.
It was great to have you. And so for all of you, again, if you happen to be watching live, you're on the inside. And in the future, when we transition pretty much all of these episodes to live, that's one more reason that you want to be a part of either our Facebook or LinkedIn group, because that's where you'll be able to know when they're going to be, and you can get on board 1-2+ months ahead of time before they show up in your podcast feed. Go to remarkablepodcast.com/Facebook or remarkablepodcast.com/LinkedIn to join. We'll hope you'll do that. And whether you do that or not, whether you're listening live or watching and listening later, we'll be back next week with another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. Thanks, everybody.